Tips from Trestle is brought to you by the Belter Companies, Navigator Group Purchasing, and eMenu Choice Point of Sale. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. During 3 decades in the hospitality industry, I focused my work on creating exceptional experiences for the customers we serve. My goal for this podcast? Educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By creating hospitality with a purpose, by bringing the customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Joining me today on Tips from Trestle is Andy Gamma. Andy is a seasoned expert in janitorial and sanitation products, boasting over 40 years of industry experience. He has spent his career working hands-on with customers, creating long-standing relationships, and he focuses on developing and supporting fulfillment programs that cater to the needs of each individual business. Andy's passion for the industry, paired with his extensive knowledge, allows him to bridge the gap between manufacturers and decision-makers in organizations. Andy, thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Thanks, Aaron. Happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about how you got your start in chemical and sanitation and how it translates to our world in senior living.
Well, it started as a summer job in high school with absolutely no intent of doing this. It kind of evolved into a sales position after I had done janitorial equipment repair. And then in my early 20s, bought my own distribution company, ran that for 25 years. And then sold that off to another distributor and went to work for them. So it's been a situation that wasn't planned, but it's worked out well. Got sucked into the industry and never left.
You know, I've found that the best stories and the people who seem to be the most passionate about what they do kind of stumble into it. You know, they're looking for what they're trying to find, and they get into something and they just find their passion. And it's so great to just that story continues. And so,
I warn all the new hires that once you're sucked in, you're never leaving. So better plan on it.
Exactly. So, one of the biggest issues that we face and we're dealing with currently in the senior living industry is that around staffing and labor, right? And it's been ongoing since the pandemic, really. And so when you look at it from your perspective and your experience in the chemical and sanitation industry, what are some opportunities for operators in that space and in that area?
Well, every industry has been affected by the labor shortages, and we definitely have had some terrible situations with this. I think one of the things that we need to do is make the job easier for the people that we have working for us, and which will help to retain them, put the right tools in place for them to do their jobs. Labor costs compile about 90 to 95% of the cost of cleaning. So if we can create efficiencies, do ergonomic things, cut down on workers' comp claims, things like that, you're going to retain your employees. Find products and systems that are easy to train. We carry a chemical line that one chemical does 85 to 90% of the cleaning of daily cleaning routines. And it's a product that they actually have a program called Train in 10. So you can train a new employee in 10 minutes on the chemical program. So if you do have turnover, it's an easy situation for the supervisors to get people up and going.
Has the chemical industry always had this kind of focus on labor? It's not been something that we've talked about a lot until recently, I should say. And so, And chemicals is not really an area where you think in cleaning, that's not a space where you think, man, we got to figure out ways to save and cut back and understand that outside of how do we save on the actual chemical costs. And so from your perspective, how should operators view that chemical cost when they think about the bigger picture of their operation?
Well, again, it's more important to save the labor than it is to save the cost of chemicals. If I can go into a facility and save them 10 or 15% on their labor costs, they won't care what their chemical costs are because it's such a small portion of their total dollars. But from the standpoint of what they're stocking, what they have to have in their closets, if we can narrow the focus down on what they're using, we're going to save money, and we're going to save issues with having problems with safety and different things like that. Unfortunately, most chemical companies have the idea that the more chemicals we have in a building, the better it is. So you walk into a closet and there's 25 or 30 different things, of which 3 or 4 are actually used on a daily basis. So if we can get that down to something that's reasonable, you're going to have a far better situation, and it'll just become a natural situation of getting, lower costs to the facility.
Yeah, and one thing that I always think about is, we're talking right now kind of holistically about like a all community, right? But when you think about the different chemical needs for housekeeping versus, say, the kitchen, how do you balance that for an operator, getting them to see, there are certain things they've got to have, but there are definitely chemicals that can overlap that they can use throughout, especially for maybe an operator who's not as well versed in the space as someone like you may be.
I mean, you're gonna run into situations with front of the house and back of the house have some crossover, but most chemicals are getting fairly, pretty specific. When you start looking at kitchen, anything that we can do that we can dispense as opposed to somebody pouring is going to be a better situation. We're seeing a lot of our chemical manufacturers moving toward solids instead of liquids, because we can ship 10 times more solids in the same space as we can liquids. So just picture 10 semis going down the road as opposed to one if it's a solid situation. You take all of the dilution and everything out of the operator's hands. So now you're also creating a more safe environment, and you're properly using the chemicals, because everybody overuses chemicals. So if we can get proper dilution into the project that we're working on, it's going to do a better job, and it's going to save the facilities money.
Yeah, you mentioned safety, and I think that's an area that everybody's very like mindful of, right? Especially when it comes to chemicals. And so when you're working with operators, what do you find from a training perspective? Does there need to be more investment on that? Do they need to partner more with their vendors to be successful in the training arena, or what kind of solutions have you found in that area have been the most successful?
Safety is always a concern. One of the problems we see, and we see it more in schools than we do in healthcare type situations, but a lot of employees try to bring chemicals into the workplace, which is the worst thing we can possibly have. First off, you don't have any safety data sheets that let you know what the situation is with all of the chemicals you're bringing in. So the first thing that any facility has to do is prevent anybody from bringing things in. We see it in schools with teachers bringing in cleaners for their desks and whatever. Well, if there's a spill or there's an accident, emergency response comes, they don't know what you're using or what's in it or how they're actually supposed to treat the person when those things happen. Everything that comes through distribution like ourselves will have SDS sheets available. They're posted online, they're on our website. There's numerous different ways that you can get them. And it gives the emergency response people the right clue of where they're supposed to head when there is a situation.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And, I think you're right. I know when I first started in the industry, it was always like, what is this bottle on your housekeeping cart and why is it here?
Correct.
Right. And it's like, but I think you're right that over time, our healthcare facilities and senior living facilities have really kind of dialed in that understanding and why it's so important to do what they do. So
yeah, and the going to your, what's on the cart is always a situation. We'll walk into a building and there'll be a cart with a plain white spray bottle and its magic marker written on it with what it supposedly is. Well, from an OSHA standpoint, that's a violation. It can go up to $1,000 a bottle when there's an OSHA when there's an OSHA violation in a facility.
today I want to tell you about one of Trestle's senior living partners, Belter. Belter is a food service design, equipment, and supply company that has been providing expert guidance to the food and beverage industry for nearly a century. A strategic partner to the most successful food service operations in the country, Belter provides support in kitchen and bar design, equipment procurement and install, and supplies. Their team of senior living food service experts have experience across the continuum of care. From independent living to skilled nursing and CCRCs, Belter specializes in right-sizing new facilities, modernizing remodels, and providing the right food service equipment and supplies. At Belter, they are committed to creating memorable experiences for their customers and their guests. With their top-notch team and a global network of quality supplier partners, their customer-focused approach is built on a foundation of collaboration and decades of industry experience. So thank you for considering Belter for all of your food service needs. So Andy, that's a great kind of segue and understanding of why safety is so important. As we were preparing, you kind of had told a story about, the hazards of mixing chemicals. I believe it had to do with hydrochloric acid or something. Excuse me. And I'd love for you to kind of give that example to our listeners so they can really get an understanding of why it's so important.
Sure. I mean, there's never situations where you should be mixing chemicals. They're all designed for their correct use. So we were on a call last fall at a school, and they actually had a chemical fire in their kitchen. And what had happened is a acid bowl cleaner bottle had tipped over, spilled into a bucket of chlorine tablets that they used for disinfecting in their kitchen sinks. Started a chemical fire that started to burn against the wall. It didn't create a large fire, but it created a white powdery smoke throughout the building. Fortunately, the fire alarms went off, but unfortunately, the fire department arrived. They walked around the building. They looked. They saw no smoke. They saw no issues. They figured it was a false alarm and left. The fire burned throughout the entire night. Custodian came in, opened the door the next morning. White powdery smoke came rolling out the door. Fortunately, he didn't walk in the room because he would have been killed by the chlorine gas that was coming out of this fire. Got the fire department over there. They ventilated the building. Nothing was actually burning other than the chemicals in this bucket, and melted a few ceiling tiles, but it completely destroyed all of the kitchen equipment. All of the stainless in the kitchen was rusted. All of the control boards and every piece of electronic equipment was destroyed. Fluorescent fixtures had to be replaced, and this spread throughout the entire school. So anything with PC boards in it needed to be replaced in the building.
Yeah, and I can imagine today if something like that happened, I mean, you could shut down an operation for weeks trying to get that back online with something like that.
Yeah, this school was actually shut down. The fire happened in October last year. We were there around Thanksgiving time. They didn't open back up until after the first of the year.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think that something as small as, just that simple like tablet falling into another chemical caused that kind of significant damage. But I think that's kind of maybe where we lose people if they're not properly trained around understanding why chemicals need to be used the way that the experts say they should be used. Because we know kind of all the old stories about, you can mix these things and they work better and this and that. But, our chemicals now today are definitely different than they were, even 10, 15 years ago. So
Definitely.
I wanted to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about technology, right? There's this is the other area that senior living operators are really kind of dialing into and getting a better understanding of how can they find savings, how can they be more efficient. And so from your vantage point with all of your experience in the industry, how has like sanitation technology evolved over the years and to kind of got us to where we are today, and what are some of the things that our listeners should be looking for on the horizon?
Well, we can start really simply. I mean, a lot of facilities are still swinging a mop and running a regular vacuum cleaner. There's so many ways of speeding that process. Get rid of the mop and bucket, go to some form of a battery powered auto scrubber. Uh, does a couple of things. First off, it does a better job. You're not just pushing dirty water around,
Yeah.
which is typically what you're doing with a mop bucket and a wringer. You start using auto scrubbers, you're laying down water, scrubbing, picking up. So you're doing a better job on the floor. Your floor finish lasts longer, your floors last longer. But the biggest thing is you pick up about 75% of your labor time by doing that. Simple example is you can mop at between 4 and 5,000 square feet an hour. 20-inch auto scrubber will clean between 16 and 18,000 square feet an hour.
Wow.
So you're
Yeah.
you're you know 3 times more production, and you're doing a better job. So when you look at the cost of a auto scrubber, if it's $3,000 or $4,000, you'll pay for that in labor savings within 3 to 4 months. So everything after that is you're picking up money for the company.
Do you find that when you bring something like that to an operator, that there's hesitation or pushback, or do you like get the ahas? Because I know in the past I've had mixed like responses to something like that, where it's, hey, we can spend this, like you said, 3, 4, $5,000 of capex and get this piece of equipment, and it will make us more efficient. But then the powers that be are kind of hesitant because they're like, but will it really do that? Like, they kind of stick to what they know, and they're kind of hesitant to change. And so do you find that that's softening some as you talk to operators nowadays?
Navigator is the largest full-service GPO that exclusively focuses on the senior living community. And what that means is we provide products and services that help our members provide a great environment for their residents, such as like MRO, hospitality equipment, food, business products, as well as technology solutions. We actually surround our members with a level of support unmatched in the industry.
Oh, we're definitely seeing it improving because labor shortage is an issue. Well, if I can come in and say, okay, well, we just freed up 2 hours of somebody's time by running an auto scrubber instead of them swinging a mop, it'll definitely make a difference. The other thing is we love going into facilities where they're doing nothing but mopping, and we run an auto scrubber and we show them what their floors look like once we run an auto scrubber across them. We'll leave a clean path right down the middle of their hallway on something they thought was clean.
Yeah.
So, and I've been in all kinds of facilities, and sometimes long-term care are some of the worst. There's a lot of foot traffic, there's a lot of spills, there's a lot of things that happen, and there's just not enough people to stay on top of it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of the technology, senior living has always, from my vantage point, kind of been the last adopter of new technology. And it always been a struggle in my mind as to why it was that way. But I think, the market has kind of forced them into it. And so,
the other advantage that we've seen come out in probably the last 3 or 4 years is we're starting to see the cleaning industry move towards more battery platforms on equipment. Kind of think of the Milwaukee Electric tool that you have
yeah,
one battery that fits 37 different items. Well, we're starting to see that in the Jansan industry now. You have a backpack, you have a wet dry, you got an auto scrubber, you got a small mopping system. They're all using the same battery. So now that you've adapted that platform, you can get 6, 7, 8 different machines that are all running on the same battery platform. So your costs drop on what you're having to bring in as far as the power for those things. The other thing that you gain, and there's a zillion different studies out there on when you go from a corded machine to cordless, that you cut your labor time in half because of cord management. There was a study done on backpacks in Denver schools that they had a team cleaning person that ran a backpack, and he cleaned 22 classrooms, and it took him 4 hours using a corded machine. They gave him a battery backpack. He did it in an hour and 55 minutes.
Wow, that's a heck of a savings. And I can speak from experience, right? I guess I'm still old school. I know that like the trimmer for my lawn is still electric and I'm still corded.
Sure.
And it's, I'm dragging that cord across the lawn, and I should probably get out of the dark ages, but
Well, and when you think about looking for an outlet, I mean, the schools, it's a horrible situation because all the computers, everything that's plugged in. So a custodian walks into a classroom. First thing he does, he spends 5 minutes trying to find an open outlet to plug his vacuum cleaner into.
yeah.
And then he goes 50 feet and he's got to plug it back in again because he ran out of cord. So the batteries definitely are definitely making a huge difference in the labor savings.
Yeah, and I think about common spaces in a senior living community that you may get an outlet here and there for lighting or something, but it's not a priority. It's not something that people think about when they're designing, that we've got to do that. So I do, before we kind of wrap up here today, I want to ask you kind of this is the age old question when it comes to equipment, right? Lease versus own. You've been doing this for quite a while, and so I'd love to get your take on that, what your thoughts are about that, and why operators should consider one versus the other, or when one over the other makes more sense.
We see geographically leasing being more popular in some places than the other. Where we are in southeastern Wisconsin, there's a lot of very frugal people that would rather own something than make a payment on it. But we do see leasing make sense from the standpoint of, you bring on a new project, you bring on a new machine, and you have a lot of upfront cost. And if we look at a situation like a contract cleaner, he brings on a new customer, he's not going to see wages, money coming in from that customer for 2 to 3 months, but he had to put out money for the equipment, he had to put money for the labor. So if he goes in a leasing situation, he puts out 1 or 2 months payment. We can extend leases out 3 to 5 years typically. So their upfront cost is way lower. There's obviously some costs with interest. There's carrying costs of the lease.
Yeah.
But there's also tax advantages, because instead of it being a capital improvement that you have to depreciate, it's actually an expense monthly. So you're writing that piece of equipment off from day one as in your monthly payment. So you can get into a lease pretty easily.
Yeah, I've always been a proponent of lease versus owning, especially when it comes to things like dish machines. Because a lot of times, vendors and will have maintenance and things like that included, which I think is such a huge piece of it as well. So,
right. And the other thing that's coming out now is we're starting to see some autonomous equipment hitting the market in the Jansan world. Auto scrubbers. Next thing will be sweepers that you actually teach the piece of equipment what it's going to clean, and there's no driver on it at that point. Most of those all come with lease programs because it's a high-end piece of equipment, and there's a lot of upgrades that go on. So they usually put together like a 3-year package that includes all of the brain program and everything like that, and all of the service.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a ton of sense what you're saying. So, kind of as we wrap up our time here, Andy, I know that, sustainability is one of those things that we think about a lot. Safety is very important. When you think about all of the various things going on in the chemical and sanitation industry and how it could relate to senior living operations, what's kind of the one thing that you always want to make sure your customers know and understand when it comes to the services you provide and what they need to do to be successful in the long run?
we want all of our customers to rely on us as the experts in what we're doing. Don't be afraid to ask questions. There's things that evolve every day in our industry. You bring up sustainability and green products and things like that, and that's getting better and better. Safety issues are coming out more with the solid type programs. So use us as a resource. We're there to partner with our customers. We're not just there to sell you something. I've been in this industry so long, and it's long-term relationships, and pick up the phone. Let's talk about what your needs are.
Yeah, no, great advice. I think that partnership piece is so very important. So, well, Andy, I appreciate your time and your expertise. This has been a great conversation. It's an area that doesn't get a lot of talk when we talk about things, and we're always looking for the bright, shiny things. But having a really good, solid chemical program and knowing how to manage it well is really important, I think, going forward. So, thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So there you have it, another one in the books. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Twitter at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.